Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to the Universal Temple for the Sun, Planet, Moon, and Stars. I'll be your host, Lord Messiah. And today we're going into or back into the Treaty Handbook. And this handbook you can find on, you type in United Nations Treaty Collections. That's a website. You're going to come on their front page, scroll down to the bottom footer. You're going to see a list of documents. You're going to see Treaty Handbook. You're going to see Final Clauses Handbook. The Treaty Handbook is teaching you how to develop treaties, how to deposit your treaty, how to deposit declarations, instruments of full power, instruments of accession with the Secretary General. And the Office of Legal Affairs handles all the paperwork and, makes it public notice for you, pushes it around to the other nations and put them on notice if they want to accede to the treaty. And when you get nations that want to accede to your treaty, like I was mentioning, the nation of gods of earth, we can develop a universal treaty of peace and present it to all nations. And if they choose to accede to our treaty, then that means that they are acceding to our contract under our terms. You understand? You know what I'm saying? So that's the science of that. And then the Final Clauses Handbook is dealing with everything that the Department of Legal Affairs and the Secretary General, like everything that they do and all their protocols and policies and so forth, of what they have to do to prepare the documents and make sure that the documents are ready to be presented, at the convention. The Secretary General even at the convention stands up and speaks, impartially on behalf of your nation, basically stating that, yes, they filled out, they presented or deposited all the proper instruments. All their instruments are proper. Everything is in place. Everything is to protocol. And they present these documents before the other nations. You know what I mean? So that's a lot. That's a lot that they do. You know what I'm saying? As to where after we do our part, which is developing the actual treaty, then we deposit it with the Secretary General. So I'm going to go through this here and show y'all some of what the book is detailing. The handbook is detailing. All right, so starting up here, you have the introduction. You have depositing multilateral treaties. Secretary General as depository, depository functions of the Secretary General, like what their duty is to do and so forth, like I was just explaining. Designation of depository, like where do you deposit the documents, you know what I mean? Participating in multilateral treaties. Now, multilateral treaty is a treaty that is agreed upon between multiple nations. You know what I'm saying? It's not just like one nation, or like one nation in the state. Like say, like if I couldn't get nobody to treaty with me in my treaty, right? And I took my treaty, I said, okay, well, I'm trying to get some sovereignty at least within the state. So I treaty with the state. With the state, then it'll be a bilateral treaty. You know what I'm saying? Like just two people, in the treaty. You know what I'm saying? A bilateral contract, basically. And then a multilateral treaty would be a treaty with multiple nations all attesting to the same thing, all in agreement. So you have signature, you have introduction, you have open for signature, simple signature, definitive signature. Now, the science of signatures is that you can present a treaty and have the treaty be open for signature, meaning like if there's other nations that want to come on and ratify, meaning sign on to your treaty and accede to it, it'll be open for signature. You know what I'm saying? If you choose for it to be. But if let's just say you just want it to be a bilateral treaty, just you and the state, and that's just it, then just make it you an estate, and it won't necessarily be open for signature. You know what I'm saying? It's a choice whether you want to have it that way. So then now getting into full powers. Signature of treaty without an instrument of full powers. So now, if you have a treaty without an instrument of full powers, requirements of instrument of full powers, form of instrument of full powers, appointment with the depository for affixing signature. So in other words, like the person that signs the instrument of full power would be the one who acts as the minister for foreign affairs. You know what I'm saying? The minister for foreign affairs. And that person is the one who signs on because they have the authority to sign on behalf of, the said nation. So that's the science of what they're dealing with full powers. And also the instrument of full powers is kind of like it's stating like your preliminary rights, or your what they call plenitary rights, which are like basically your rights that stand and exist before you even go into contract or into treaty with the state or any multilateral treaty with other nations. You're stating the fact that, like, listen, this is what it is, saying before all of this even happens, saying it's kind of like you're stating your status and so forth, setting your standard of your standing in your jurisdiction. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. Now, and then you go into they have consent to be bound. So the consent to be bound means like when each party agree to when both the parties agree to the treaty, then they are both consent to be bound by the treaty. You know what I mean? And what they agreed upon in the treaty. So then you have and they do that by, like they say, introduction, ratification, acceptance or approval, accession, practical consideration. So now let me break down these terms. Now, consent to be bound. So like I said, you consent to be bound. You're in agreement. The ratification, I used to think the ratification means like to change something or to like, amend it. But no, ratification means to sign on to, you know what I'm saying? So the ratification of a treaty would mean like when, like say, for example, you got the Declaration of Independence, right? You know what I mean? And you know how like all the so-called forefathers has signed on to it after, that was their ratification. Like, okay, this person signed on, John Thomas Jefferson signed on, Benjamin Franklin signed on, whoever signed, all these different people, whoever signed on this document and making it making their pledging their allegiance to it, or consenting to be bound to it, you know what I mean, through their ratification. And that was also what was called an acceptance or approval, because understand this, like I was saying in my last video about contract law, one of the first rules or aspects or conducts of contract law is what's called offer and acceptance. So when something is offered to you, you have the right to accept it or reject it. You don't have to accept everything, because if you understand what a contract is, then you'll realize that you should not accept everything, because everything that you accept is a contract. You know what I'm saying? So when you accept something, that means that you contracted into an agreement. So if you contracted into that agreement, then you are now consent to be bound. You know what I mean? So now you have also what's called, and then after you accept it, that's a form of also approval. So like you approve of, meaning you agree with what you accepted. You know what I'm saying? So how people be like, oh man, I ain't got, well, you approve of what you accept. You know what I mean? So anyway, accession. Accession means to accede to. Also, accession means to rise in the air. You know what I'm saying? To accede, to ascend, actually. Ascend means to rise in the air. But accession means to rise into power. So, for example, like a prince rises into power to sit on the throne and become king. You know what I mean? So that would be his accession to the throne. You know what I mean? And, you know, let's say the father passes away and the will, all the property in the will is left to the first of kin, the firstborn son. Then the firstborn son would become, you know, the heir to the throne, then as they call next of kin. Well, that would be more so pertaining to the siblings, but uh, the holder in due course when it comes to legal terminology or instrumentality. You be the holder in due course, meaning the one holding the legal title to inherit all the property. You know what I mean? So, like I was saying, the same thing with that birth certificate. When they slapped that birth certificate on us, they basically labeled us as property. And what we have to do is draw up a declaration, a document stating that, listen, I'm no longer bound. I no longer consent to be bound to the instrumentality of this instrument. You know what I'm saying? Basically what this instrument's representing. I'm not state property. I'm not, you know, even though they got this document in the Department of Vital Statistics, that doesn't make me, you know, whatever. I'm now what you call the first lien holder or the holder in due course, because once you attach your declaration to the document, now that becomes what's called an annex. An annex is an attachment, especially of a document to another document. So now once you add that document or annex that declaration to the birth certificate, you have now made what's called an adhesion contract or what's called a counterclaim. You know what I mean? You have now contested the prior contract. You know what I mean? So, and like I was breaking down also in that jewel where they talk about international law, in absence of a title, then those who have the title will enjoy priority over the effective possession of the land. Meaning, you could physically be living on a land, but if a person have legal title to that, they can have sheriffs come and evict you off the land. You see what I'm saying? So you have to secure your legal title to whatever properties you have. You know what I mean? So so accession, like I was saying, so accession basically means to accede to become a part to. So like I said, if we draw up a universal treaty of peace and we present it to other nations and other nations say, hey, I like that treaty. That sounds ill. Yo, I like that, man. Yo, that's peace. You know what I'm saying? Yo, we want to be down with that. Then they accede to our universal treaty of peace. You know what I'm saying? And now they accede to our rules, regulations, laws, whatever case may be, and so forth and so forth. You know what I'm saying? Like what we're laying down. You know what I mean? They're acceding to it. You know, if people don't want to accede to another treaty or treaty that's already in existence, we can create our own treaty and then have people accede to our treaty. How about that? We have the power to do that. Yes, we do. So why are we sitting around talking about, oh, we don't have to do that. We don't have to file no paperwork. We don't have to. Yes, you do. Because all civilized nations of the planet have done this. And not saying you got to do it in the exact way that they have or whatever, but do it in some kind of way. And don't just make no verbal announcement. You have to put that in some kind of publication. You have to publicize your information, make it public knowledge. And then once it's made public knowledge and it's uncontested, then it becomes law because no one contested it, no one objected to it. So therefore, that is their silent acquiescence, meaning they agree. You know what I mean? They basically, and that's another way of, like I said, you don't have to force people to ratify your documents, like sign on to you don't have to force them to accept or approve of your documents or even accede to it. But once you, is this the next thing? Practical consideration. Let's dig into that. Practical application. So you can simply draw up your own treaty and have them accede to your treaty. You know what I'm saying? Reservations are when you like sign on to a treaty and it's like you got to wait for their approval or for them to approve to you and all of that. I don't like reservations. I don't waste times on reservations because that shit takes too long. That shit could take to like 6 months to a year or some shit. Like when you accede to a treaty, you just accede to it, and the force of entry is happens at the moment of a session. You don't have to wait for necessarily for an approval or a word back or stuff like that. You just automatically accede to it. So practical consideration says form of instrument or ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession. So in other words, I guess it could be any one of those above forms. You know what I'm saying? When a state wishes to ratify, accept, approve, or accede to a treaty, it must execute an instrument of ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession. See, so these are different instruments that you present like in different ways. So if you want to ratify or sign on to a treaty, you gotta produce you have to execute an instrument of ratification. If you accept or approve, you gotta execute an instrument of acceptance or instrument of approval. If you accede to the treaty, then you draw up what's called the instrument of accession. Like I said, I deal with the instrument of accession. You know what I'm saying? Instrument for accession, because like I said, as soon as you accede to it, you just signed on to it automatically. You don't gotta wait for the reservation. You don't gotta wait for and all of that and all of that. You know what I'm saying? It's just you automatically on deck. You know what I mean? So and it says signed by one of the three specified authorities, namely the head of state, head of government, or minister. Oh, and see how they said right here? Even they put it. You know how we say minister, it says minister of foreign affairs. This right here said minister for foreign affairs. So you know how I was saying how whenever you see the word of, change it to for, because of incorporates things. Even they put minister for foreign affairs. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's what's up. So when you see on my thing right here, minister for foreign affairs, that's what it is. And that is in the same sense of saying a head of state, head of government. But being that I'm not necessarily dealing with a so-called government. I mean, I do have my own government, but I'm saying, it's not that their government or their state, head of state. So I would be known as a minister of foreign affairs for the universal temple for the sun, planet, moon, and stars. And my universal temple is my ministry. Therefore, a root word of minister, I'm a minister. And a minister is not in the wisdom bill degree, the one marrying the unalike. A minister is a politician acting as acting on behalf of a ministry. You know what I'm saying? That's what it is. Minister for foreign affairs. So therefore, like I said, my ministry is my temple, my universal temple. And I travel, and I'm gonna travel and act on behalf of my nation as the minister for foreign affairs. There is no mandated form for the instrument, but it must include the following. So just like I was telling a brother at the parliament at the school on Sunday, he was showing me all his different licenses and certifications and so forth he got. And I said, yo, God, you can also form, you can be an independent contractor, and you can also form your what's called a foreign LLC. You know how you got a limited liability? You can have what's called a foreign limited liability corporation. So therefore, it's not even it's a LLC, but it's also foreign to any like corporate or corporation. So in other words, you didn't necessarily it's incorporated in your own means, but it's not incorporated with the state, and that's what makes it foreign. You see what I'm saying? Now you might pay a certain fee or whatever for them to process the paperwork and so forth, but within the paperwork, it's letting you know that your document, that your information, that your corporation is going to be foreign. And also they tell you like the same thing is about to tell you here, how it says there is no mandated form for the instrument, meaning it doesn't have to be exactly in the form how they put it, because they give you templates and whatnot, you know what I mean? But it has to basically include this general information that they're gonna put below here. You know what I'm saying? Like the title, place of date, conclusion of the treaty, name of the person who signed the instrument, head of state, minister for foreign affairs, all or this information that they're asking for basically has to be in there. You know what I mean? So, and the same thing, like I was saying, with the instruments, with the LLC papers or the foreign LLC, they tell you right there in the documentation, in their little footnotes. That's why you got to read that small print, because that's real important. It tells you that you don't necessarily have to use their forms. You can make your own form in lieu of, you know what I'm saying? And but Born Universal Truth, just make sure that it has the basic elements of what they're asking for in their form. So you can also like add on extra stuff and be like, yo, you know, state your status, your nationality, your this, all that good stuff in there. And you know what I'm saying? Also have the basic information that they ask for in their document. So by you adding that extra stuff in there, that's why you're actually renewing the history. You know what I'm saying? Like our lessons tell us to do, renew your history. You renew the history or renew the structure of the document and make it your own. You know what I'm saying? That's what makes it, you know what I'm saying? That's what it makes it not like plagiarism. You know how they say if you change one word of a paragraph, it's no longer plagiarism. So it's like, you know, you have to change things so that it's not plagiarism. And so, I mean, not necessarily for that purpose, but I'm just saying, so that it's not like, you know, you don't have to necessarily follow their exact form or their exact structure. You know what I mean? So that's very good to know too. You know what I mean? So yeah, let me go back up to the table of contents. So yeah, y'all. So you know, these are the things that I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? And these are the things that I'm trying to share the information with the nation, so we can also get up on this information, because we can apply this information to our nation. But we ain't waiting on reservations. So then they got Vienna Convention in 1969. Because yeah, all of this here goes back to the Vienna Convention. And let me read this. I'm glad it's good I clicked on that, because I'm gonna read this here from here, and y'all can hear some of this. What is the Vienna Convention?
Participate in 3.5.2 Vienna Convention 1969. Article 19 of the Vienna Convention 1969 specifies that a state may, when signing, ratifying, accepting, approving, or acceding to a treaty, make a reservation unless the reservation is prohibited by the treaty. B. The treaty provides that only specified reservations, which do not include the reservation in question, may be made, or C. In cases not falling under the above two categories, the reservation is incompatible with the object and purpose of the treaty. In some cases, treaties specifically prohibit reservations. For example, Article 120 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, 1998, provides, no reservations may be made to this statute. Similarly, no entity may make a reservation or exception to the agreement relating to the implementation of Part 11 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea of December 10, 1982, 1994, except where expressly permitted elsewhere in the agreement. 3.5.3 Time for formulating reservations. Formulating reservations upon signature, ratification, acceptance, approval, or accept.
Yeah, we ain't dealing with reservations. But like I said, that shit takes bad long and all of that. Upon, you heard them, they said upon approval and acceptance and all that. We ain't waiting for all of that. You know what I'm saying? That takes mad long. And this is why I say also, we need to just draw up our own universal treaty and present it to nations. And then they're going to jump on that like hotcakes. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said, man, we the most intelligent minds. You know, the stuff we can put together, what we can draw up, you know what I'm saying? In our Constitution, our information, our treaty will be so divine, man. People gonna jump on it, man. What y'all, man? Listen, everybody gonna want a treaty with the gods of Earth. Everybody gonna want to accede to our treaty. You know what I'm saying? Everybody want to everybody. It seems like how the God says, Saladin. It seems like everyone wants to be the God, but still be pushing them paper theories while they worshiping some mystery. You know what I'm saying? I ain't pushing no paper theories and I ain't worshiping no mystery. You know what I'm saying? And I'm showing and proving the God. You know what I'm saying? So this is what it is. You know what I'm saying? This is some next level information. You know what I mean? And all right, so let's continue. time for formulation of reservations, like they're just about to go into forms of reservation, notice of reservation, objection to reservations, withdrawal of reservations, modifications of reservations. Yeah, so in other words, you can make a reservation, but they could deny it. You could withdraw your reservation if you want to, you know, say so forth, so forth. Yeah, man. We're gonna get into declarations. And I'm gonna end this off, and I'm gonna come back on next one, because like I said, I'm gonna try to make these videos shorter and shorter. I know y'all don't want to watch these long-winded videos, so I'm gonna try to make these things shorter and shorter. You know, make this one maybe a half hour, and I'll come back. All right, so we're gonna go into declarations. What is a declaration?
Declarations. See the summary of practice, paras. 217 to 220. 3.6.1 Interpretative Declarations. A state may make a declaration about its understanding of a matter contained in, or the interpretation of a particular provision in a treaty. Interpretative declarations of this kind, unlike reservations, do not purport to exclude or modify the legal effects of a treaty.
Right.
The purpose of an interpretative declaration is to clarify the meaning of certain provisions or of the entire treaty.
So in other words,
some treaties specific.
So in other words, if a state wants to accede to your treaty, they can make a declaration saying, okay, well, we accede to this part, this part, this part. We don't necessarily agree with this part, but this part, you know what I'm saying? And if you accept their form of treaty and you be like, okay, y'all want a treaty with us on that level? Okay, that's cool. Y'all don't accept all of this. All right, that's all good. But y'all accept this part? Okay, cool. You know what I'm saying? We'll rock with that. You know what I mean? Type thing. You know what I mean? So it's all based upon agreements and provisions, and you know what people accept and what they agree with. And then, like I say, when the agreement is made, that's what you call a treaty.
Treaties specifically provide for interpretative declarations. For example, when signing, ratifying, or acceding to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1982, a state may make declarations with a view.
82, that's when the God was born. Knowledge born, wisdom, knowledge born, knowledge born, build wisdom.
View to harmonizing its laws and regulations with the provisions of that convention, provided that such declarations or statements do not purport to exclude or modify the legal effect of the provisions of the convention in their application to that state.
Right. So in other words, regardless of how the state may choose to accede to your treaty, or what parts or what provisions of your treaty they choose to accede to, that doesn't change the entirety of your treaty just because they say, oh, well, that part we don't agree with. That don't mean that it changes your treaty. That just means that they acceded to certain parts of your treaty. You know what I'm saying? That they may be in agreement with, but that doesn't alter the validity of the entirety of your treaty.
State. 3.6.2 Optional and mandatory declarations. Treaties may provide for states to make optional and/or mandatory declarations. These declarations are legally binding on the declarants. Optional declarations. Many human rights treaties provide for states to make optional declarations that are legally binding upon them. In most cases, these declarations relate to the competence of human rights commissions or committees. See Section 4.3. See example, Article 41 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, 1966. A state party to the present covenant may at any time declare under this article that it recognizes the competence of the committee to receive and consider communications to the effect that a state party claims that another state party is not fulfilling its obligations under the present covenant.
Right. So that's why I say, if there's a treaty in place, then basically you could bring it forth to the World Court of Justice, to the International Court of Justice, and basically bring them up on whatever charges that they are breaching the treaty. You know what I mean?
Mandatory declarations, where a treaty requires states becoming party to it to make a mandatory declaration. The Secretary General, as depositary, seeks to ensure that they make such declarations.
Right. See, like it says, the Secretary General, as depository, seeks to make sure they make such declarations. So the Secretary General job is to make sure that, you know, every state makes their declarations if they want to accede to a treaty, you know, so forth, and you as well. If you're a nation and you want to see to a treaty of another nation, you have to, if that treaty mandates that you accede to it via a declaration, then the Secretary General makes sure that you draw up your declaration and so forth and accede to the treaty. You know what I mean? So this is the order of things. This is how all of this is, all this is done. You know what I mean? It's how they do this. You know what I mean?
Some disarmament and human rights treaties provide for mandatory declarations, as, for example, Article 3 of the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production, Stockpiling, and Use of Chemical Weapons and on Their Destruction, 1992. Article 3(2) of the optional each state party 3.6.3 time 3.6 each state party shall deposit a binding declaration upon ratification of or accession to this protocol that sets forth the minimum age at which it will permit voluntary recruitment into its national armed forces and a description of the safeguards that it has adopted to ensure that such recruitment is not forced or coerced.
Right. So you may want to be careful what treaty you accede to, because some of those treaties may say, well, certain members have to enlist in our army. You know what I'm saying? So you want to be careful. You know what I'm saying? What you signing up to? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And they got provisions, whatever, to safeguard, and ensure such requirements is not forced or coerced. You know what I mean? Recruitment is not forced or coerced.
Coerced. Mandatory declarations also appear in some treaties on the law of the sea. C. For example, when an international organization signs the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1982, UNCLOS, or the Agreement for the Implementation of the Provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea of December 10, 1982 relating to the conservation and management of straddling fish stocks and highly migratory fish stocks, 1995 agreement, it must make a declaration specifying the matters governed by UNCLOS in respect of which the organization's member states have conferred competence on the organization, and the nature and extent of that competence.
Right. So in other words, they have to agree with, everything and whatnot, and and all that good stuff. And they have to, bring forth their declaration stating their agreement. You know what I'm saying? All right, y'all. So, like I said, I'm gonna end off on that right there. I ain't gonna make this too long. I'm gonna come back on the next part, and we're gonna continue and add on. So I'm gonna say peace to y'all, and I'll see y'all back, y'all. Peace. This has been another episode of the Universal Temple for the Sun, Planet, Moon, and Stars. Peace.